was your sister? What if it was your auntie? What if it was your daughter? There's somebody murdered 9 months pregnant. And then you will want someone to speak up. So speak up and do what's right.
Durham police closing a stretch of Hillsborough Road Sunday night after a deadly drive-by shooting in front of the Wendy's fast food restaurant.
The fact that at least 7 bullet casings were in the middle of Hillsborough Road, it seems like it could have hit anybody. I mean, what are your thoughts there?
There's no regard for life. You know, anyone that's engaging in these activities, it is extremely frustrating because other people could have been hit.
That was a 30-year-old rapper out of Durham, North Carolina. A man his own label was days away from moving to Miami to keep him alive, driving down a main road with the mother of his child sitting right next to him, when a second car crept up on the passenger side and lit them up. He never made it home. She caught one to the head and barely survived. And the strangest part of the whole thing is who police say pulled this off, and the rumor that has been chasing his name online ever since. A rumor about a baby, a paternity fight, and a woman who supposedly wanted him gone. Now watch a second courtroom moment from a completely different city, because it sets up everything you are about to hear.
While we were leaving the incident and he was shooting at us, one of the bullets hit my boyfriend in the back of the head, which is what caused us to crash the car. And he landed on my belly, and I held him because I was trapped there for as long as I could until the cops got there. I wake up screaming every night. My son will never know his father.
3 stories, 3 cities, 3 lives gone, and one thread running through all of them, so tight it should scare you. Every single one of these killings starts with a pregnancy or a paternity question. A baby on the way or a baby already here became the exact reason somebody decided another person had to die. But before we get into that Carolina rapper's story, let me start with this one, because it happened the day before Christmas Eve, and it is one of the coldest things you will hear all year. Let me put you in Phoenix, Arizona, in the last week of 2024. 2 men had been together for about 6 years, and by every account, it was a real relationship, the kind with history, the kind with fights and making up and shared bills and a shared car. One of them was 35-year-old Keyshawn Stewart. The other was 33-year-old Khalid Williams. For a long time, it was just the 2 of them, until something shifted in the fall and pulled the whole thing apart at the seams. Here's where it turned. In October of 2024, the 2 men broke up after Williams learned that Stewart had started seeing a woman and that she was pregnant with Stewart's child. Sit with that for a second. A 6-year relationship ends not because the love ran out on its own, but because a whole new life was on the way with somebody else. Police would later put a name on this kind of situation, and it is the same name the local news led with the day it broke.
New at 4, a love triangle ends with a deadly shooting and a man behind bars the day before Christmas.
Yeah, police say a Phoenix man opened fire on a car with his ex-boyfriend inside and that man's pregnant girlfriend. The father of her unborn baby was killed.
They tried to stay civil after the split, at least on paper. But civil is hard when there is property tangled up between 2 people who used to share a life. The main thing they kept clashing over was a car. Stewart owned the vehicle, but Williams was the one paying for it. And anybody who has ever tried to untangle money from a breakup already knows that a car note between exes is a slow-burning fuse. Every payment was a reminder. Every reminder was another argument. And underneath all of it sat the real wound, which was the pregnancy and the fact that Stewart had moved on into a whole different chapter while Williams was still stuck in the last one. Listen to how the reporting lays out the length of the relationship and the exact thing that broke it, because the timeline matters when we get to the part about whether any of this was really self-defense.
Police say the murder victim, Keyshawn Stewart, dated Williams for 6 years, but the 2 men broke up in October. Yet the fighting continued and now involved a woman who claimed to be 3 months pregnant with Stewart's baby.
Williams himself later tried to explain the relationship to investigators, and the way he framed it tells you a lot about the mindset going into that day. He described a long history of physical and verbal fights, and he blamed what he did on what he called the culmination of the stress and drama between them, as if 2 months of resentment had been quietly stacking up like bricks until the weight finally came down all at once. He said he tried to keep things amicable through November, but amicable was never really on the table, because you cannot stay friendly with someone while the reason you broke up keeps growing in a hospital ultrasound. Every week the pregnancy got further along was another week Williams had to watch the life he thought he had drift completely out of reach, and instead of letting go, he let it fester. By December 23rd, the fuse had burned all the way down. The day started with another argument over that same car, except this time it did not stay on the phone. Stewart and his pregnant girlfriend drove over to Williams' apartment near 17th Avenue and Maryland to hash it out face-to-face, which is exactly the kind of move that feels reasonable in the heat of the moment and looks terrifying in hindsight. Two men who used to love each other, one pregnant woman caught in the middle, and a disagreement that had been building for 2 months, all showing up in one place at one time. What allegedly met them at that door is the detail that turns this from an ugly breakup into something out of a nightmare. According to court documents, Williams did not come outside to talk.
According to court documents, the day before Christmas Eve, Stewart and his pregnant girlfriend drove to Williams's home on North 17th Avenue and were greeted by the 33-year-old holding an AK-47.
A rifle. At the front door. Over a car. The men got into a fight, and then Stewart and his pregnant girlfriend made the smart call and tried to leave, getting back in their vehicle to drive away from the whole mess. That should have been the end of it. A bad day, a screaming match, and everybody goes home angry but breathing. Instead, the moment they turn to leave is the moment everything went permanent. And to understand how far past self-defense this went, you have to hear what the police say happened as that car pulled off.
Police say Stewart and his now girlfriend went to Williams' apartment near 19th Avenue in Maryland, where the men got into a fight. As Stewart and the woman drove away, police say Williams fired more than 25 rounds from a rifle, killing Stewart. The woman spoke about it in court.
I'd like to let you know that while we were leaving the incident and he was shooting at us, one of the bullets hit my boyfriend in the back of the head, which is what caused us to crash the car. And he landed on my belly, and I held him because I was trapped there for as long as I could until the cops got there. I wake up screaming every night. My son will never know his father, will never get to be held by his father.
That is where his story stops being an argument and becomes a homicide. And the next part is where the shooting itself and the 3-day manhunt come in, so stay with me. Picture the scene as Stewart and his girlfriend pull away from that apartment, thinking the worst of the night is behind them. They are in the car, moving, headed in the opposite direction. And that, according to police, is when Williams opened fire on the back of a vehicle that was already leaving. More than 25 rounds fired into a car that was driving off. One of those bullets hit Keyshawn Stewart in the back of the head, and the pregnant woman beside him described in her own words how the world came apart in the span of a few seconds. The car crashed because the driver was already gone. She landed on her own belly during the wreck, 9 weeks into carrying a child whose father was dying in the seat next to her. And she held on to him because she was trapped in the twisted metal and there was nothing else left to do. You already heard her tell it earlier, and it does not get easier the second time you think about it. Stewart was rushed to a hospital, but he did not survive his injuries. A 6-year relationship, a new baby on the way, an argument about a car, and it all ended with one man dead in a crashed vehicle and a pregnant woman screaming for help on 17th Avenue. Think about what she carried out of that wreck. She was about 3 months along. She had just watched the father of her child take a bullet to the head, and the impact of the crash slammed her own pregnant body against the inside of the car. The fact that shots were fired toward her too is the reason Williams was later charged with attempted murder on top of everything else, because in the eyes of the law, he did not just kill one person that night, he tried to take 2 more, her and the baby she was carrying. She survived. her child survived, but she will spend the rest of her life knowing that her son will never meet the man who was supposed to raise him. Meanwhile, the man police say pulled the trigger did the one thing that tells you he understood exactly what he had just done. He ran. He did not run far in terms of miles, but he stayed gone long enough to make the police work for it. Watch how they finally ran him down, and pay close attention to the piece about his record because it becomes a whole separate charge on top of the murder.
Police say Williams ran from the scene, and it took 3 days to hunt him down. Officers finding his car at a Mexican food restaurant where he was arrested.
Mr. Williams has a criminal history with 6 prior felonies. Although none of them are crimes of violence, that is a significant number of prior felony convictions.
Officers finally caught up with Williams on December 26th, spotting his car outside a Mexican food restaurant and arresting him there 3 full days after the shooting. And that mention of his record is not a throwaway line. Williams had 6 prior felony convictions, and while none of them were violent, they still made him a prohibited possessor under Arizona law, meaning he was not legally allowed to touch a firearm at all, let alone a rifle. So the same 6 felonies that were supposed to keep a gun out of his hands became the reason he was facing an extra charge on the day he used one to kill somebody. Then came the part that really sinks the self-defense story. Williams told police the shot went off at accident, that he never meant for any of it to happen the way it did. The evidence at the scene tells a very different tale. You do not accidentally fire 25 rounds. 1 shot can be an accident, 2 can be a panic. 25 spent casings scattered across the ground, aimed at a car that was already pulling away, is a decision that got made over and over again in the time it took to empty that rifle. And the surveillance footage caught the whole thing, which is why when detectives finally sat him down and showed him what the camera saw, his story shifted from denial to something closer to acceptance. In one interview, he reportedly told them the victim did not deserve that he was not in the right state of mind, and that all he could do was accept responsibility and pray for forgiveness. Here is why that self-defense claim was always going to struggle. Under the law, self-defense means you reasonably feared harm was coming for you right that second, and that you used force to stop it. But you cannot claim you feared for your life while you're the one shooting at the backs of people who were driving away from you. Williams even admitted that neither Stewart nor the woman had a weapon on them. So you have an unarmed couple leaving the scene, a man with a rifle firing more than 25 rounds at their fleeing car, and a camera recording all of it. That is not a person defending himself. That is a person who did not want to let go, and the volume of gunfire is exactly what prosecutors point to when they argue this was planned rather than panicked. The choice of weapon, an AK-style rifle, and the sheer number of shots turned the whole self-defense story into something a jury is unlikely to buy. But in the courtroom, a very different Williams showed up. At his first appearance, the judge had to keep telling him to be quiet because he wouldn't stop talking, and a man who will not stop talking in front of a judge is usually a man about to say something that hurts his own case. He did not shut up.
33-year-old Khalid Williams was told multiple times by the judge to not say anything during his initial appearance Friday. Williams is accused of shooting and killing 35-year-old Keyshawn Stewart.
I suggest that you not make any statements. If your attorney was here, he'd tell you just to shut up.
Instead, he tried to spread the blame around the room, and the thing he chose to say out loud in open court was that the pregnant woman who watched her boyfriend die was somehow just as guilty as he was. A man who fired 25 rounds into a car full of unarmed people, one of them pregnant, stood in front of a judge and pointed the finger at the victim. His bond was set at $1 million, and he now faces 4 felonies, including premeditated murder in the first degree. As of the latest public records, his case is still working its way through the Maricopa County courts, the way these heavy cases tend to drag for a year or more before anybody sees a verdict. The most gutting moment of the whole thing is the last exchange caught on camera when Williams throws the blame at the woman one final time and she answers him with two small words, "I tried."
Caleb Williams also spoke out in court. Here's what he had to say.
They were warned not to come to my home. They were threatening to harm me. She's just as much responsible for this as I am. She should have stopped him.
I tried.
No, you didn't.
That is a woman who lost the father of her child, survived a car crash while pregnant, held a dying man in her arms because she was pinned in the wreckage, and still had to sit there and be told it was partly her fault. What makes this one sting is how quietly it faded. It made the local news for a few days around Christmas, got labeled a love triangle, and then it slipped out of the headlines the way a lot of these do when they get filed under domestic dispute instead of front-page tragedy.
Love triangle ends with a deadly shooting and a man behind bars the day before Christmas.
Yeah, police say a Phoenix man opened fire on a car with his ex-boyfriend inside and that man's pregnant girlfriend. The father of her unborn baby was killed.
The last public word on it is that the case is still moving through the Maricopa County courts, still waiting on the hearings and motions that first-degree murder cases drag through for a year or more before anyone stands in front of a jury. So there is no ending here yet. No verdict, just a man in custody, a family without a father, and a story that most of the country never even heard. Keyshawn Stewart was remembered by loved ones as a person full of life and joy who saw the good in everything, and his son will grow up never knowing him. That's our first story. Now let me take you to Durham, where a rising rapper met a similar ending in the middle of a busy road, except his came with a mystery that the internet has still not let go of. His name was Iris Jeffrey, but the streets and the streaming services knew him as Billy Reio. He was born on January 25, 1995 in Durham, North Carolina, a city folks who love it just call Bull City. And he came up the way a lot of talented kids from tough neighborhoods come up, with a foot in two worlds at the same time.
My little homies keep the wines, Cosmo and Wanda, and they grant my every wish, therefore I wish death on all my hoppers. And my little bro, he a janitor, he stay mopping. Billy gang, bitch, big bees, we stay popping. Riding on the op, so you was 12, you was the police, you was riding with the coppers. We got choppers that'll land on your roof like helicopters.
He went to the Durham School of the Arts, a magnet school built around music and performance, which is where a raw kid learns to turn the things he has lived through into something people want to hear. For a long stretch, he was just another local artist grinding it out, dropping tracks on YouTube with neighborhood collaborators and building a name one song at a time. Then things started moving. He signed with Rich Nation Entertainment, a label out of Miami, and started putting out real records like No Lie, Bonnie and Clyde, and a song called Labeled Me Top Shotta that connected him to none other than NBA Youngboy, one of the biggest names in the game.
Nando, fuck that bitch, she ain't talking about shit, get on that car. Pump a nigga drunk, we give out shots just like a bar. Told my BM play with me today, I'm killing shit tomorrow. My bitch bad like Chloe play, I send shots like Lamar. New MP, I busted out the box, that bitch came black like tar. I'm a P, I have her on her knee, she eat it till it's raw. Put that smack down on her jaw, she like, boy, you getting off.
For an independent artist out of Durham, a look like that is the door finally cracking open. His grind did not start with a major feature, though. It started the way most of these stories start, with him and his people making songs in the neighborhood and throwing them up on YouTube. Early tracks like Type of Way with Big 93 and So Petty with P Black, the kind of raw local records that build a name block by block before any label is paying attention. His real debut single, No Lie, dropped in 2024 once he signed with Rich Nation, and from there the pace picked up fast, with Bonnie and Clyde and then the NBA Youngboy record landing in 2025. His music leaned into the same themes so many Southern rappers pull from: loyalty, struggle, and survival, the pain of the streets set to a melody. By late 2025, the label was talking about distribution through some of the biggest names in the business, and for a kid who had been uploading videos with his friends just a couple of years earlier, that momentum was real and it was climbing. But the thing everybody who knew him keeps coming back to is not the music. It is that he was a father, first and always, a man who put his son and his daughter over the fame every single time. His label CEO described him as someone with a pure heart and real loyalty, the kind of person who stayed humble even as the buzz got louder. There was even a plan in motion to move him out of Durham entirely, down to Miami, to get him away from the danger that hangs over young men in his position. That plan ran out of time by a matter of days. On the night of January 4th, 2026, right around 9 o'clock, Billy was doing the most ordinary thing in the world. He was driving. Listen to how the local reporter walked to the very spot where his life ended, standing on the road where the car came to rest.
Well, I spoke with several family members of the victim, 30-year-old Iris Jeffrey, this afternoon as they gathered at the family's house. Now take a look at this. This is the spot right here where Jeffrey lost control of his vehicle before slamming into this light pole after he was shot. And though the family told me this afternoon that they're a little too shaken up to speak on camera, they say that their loved one did not deserve to die.
He was behind the wheel of a 2024 Chevy Malibu, heading west on Hillsborough Road, one of the busier stretches in that part of the city, right in front of a Wendy's. And he was not alone. In the passenger seat was a woman he shared a child with, which is a detail that becomes the center of everything the internet later argued about. As they rolled down that road, another vehicle pulled up on the passenger side and someone inside started shooting. The way police describe it, this was not random spray from a passing beef. The shooter's car came up alongside, matched his speed, and opened fire in a way that tells you somebody knew whose car that was. Billy was hit in the neck. He lost control, and the Malibu slammed into a light pole and came to rest in a nearby parking lot. He was rushed to the hospital, but the wound was too much, and he was gone. He was 30 years old. And the woman beside him, the mother of his child, took a bullet to the head. Somehow she survived. Watch how the reporter connects the two of them and how it lands in the middle of a city already drowning in this kind of violence.
Police say a woman in Jeffrey's car was also shot and taken to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. Jeffrey's family says the two had a child together. The mayor and local officials now working on a plan to reduce violent crimes. This drive-by shooting marking the 7th and 8th person shot in Durham over the past week.
We're launching the city and county's largest violent crime reduction collaboration in the city and county's history.
The 7th and 8th people shot in Durham in a single week. That is the backdrop this happened against, a city where gunfire had become so common that a rising star getting cut down barely stood out in the weekly count. 7 shell casings were recovered in the middle of Hillsborough Road, right there in the open, where any passing driver could have caught one. His label CEO, Michael Mitchell, the same man who had been planning to move him to safety, was left putting out tributes instead, saying the streets took a body, but they could not take a legacy. Mitchell said he wished he could have saved him, that they had already been talking about getting Billy out of Durham, and that hurts in a specific way, because it means the danger was known. The move to Miami was not a dream, it was a plan with a timeline, and the timeline lost. On January 23rd, less than 3 weeks after the shooting, Durham came together to bury him. The visitation and the service filled up with family, friends, and fans. A young father of 2 laid to rest at 30. And the tributes online painted the same picture over and over, a humble man who poured himself into his kids and his music. In a city that had a brutal start to the year, with shooting after shooting stacking up in the local crime reports, his death became one more name on a list that was already too long, and the people who loved him were left streaming his songs just to keep hearing his voice. That is where the facts end and the mystery begins, because the question of why this happened and who really set it in motion is the part that still has not been answered, and it is exactly where the next part picks up. It helps to understand the city this happened in. Durham was having a violent stretch to start the year, with shooting after shooting piling up, and Billy's killing was counted among the 7th and 8th people shot there in a single week. City leaders were standing at podiums announcing what they called the largest violent crime reduction effort in the county's history, holding public sessions, promising plans. All of that was happening in the background while a rising artist bled out on Hillsborough Road, which tells you how normal this kind of violence had become and how hard it is for any plan to move fast enough to save the person who dies tonight. For almost 3 weeks, Durham police said very little. No motive or suspect vehicle description or any explanation for why a young father driving down a main road became a target. In a case that looked this planned, that silence only made the speculation louder. And while the city waited, the investigators kept working the scene, the casings, and whatever the busy road's cameras had captured. Then the case cracked open in a way nobody outside the investigation saw coming. On January 22nd, police arrested 26-year-old Ariana Kiara Mangum and charged her with 1 count of murder, 1 count of assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill inflicting serious injury, and 2 counts of felony conspiracy. A woman, charged with murder in the drive-by killing of a rapper and held without bail in the Durham County Jail. Those 2 conspiracy counts were the tell, because conspiracy means police believe she did not act alone, that this was planned out with at least 1 other person. They were right. A couple of weeks later, police charged 25-year-old Tony Lamont Scott II with the same offenses, saying he was the driver of the second vehicle while Mangum rode as the passenger. According to the warrants, the 2 of them conspired to shoot Billy in the neck and the woman beside him in the head using a 9mm. Both were ordered to have no contact with the surviving victim, with the family, or even with each other. And here's a piece that keeps people up at night, because neither one of them had a violent record before this. Mangum's history amounted to little more than a speeding ticket, and Scott's was a couple of traffic matters, plus an old marijuana and concealed gun charge from 2019 that had been dismissed. These were not 2 hardened killers with a trail of bodies behind them. On paper, they looked ordinary, which is exactly what makes a planned, coordinated ambush like this so unsettling. Something turned 2 people with clean-ish records into a driver and a shooter who, according to the warrants, agreed to put a bullet in a man's neck and another in the head of the woman beside him. The question of what that something was is the hole in this entire case.
And that is where the internet took over, because police still had not offered a single word about why. Into that empty space rushed every theory you can imagine, and the loudest one is the reason this story carries the title it does. Online, people started pushing the idea of a setup, claiming a woman had been posting his locations and wishing him harm for months, and tying it all to a paternity or DNA dispute involving his child's mother. The theory goes that jealousy, a baby, and a paternity question sat at the root of the whole thing. I want to be straight with you because this matters. None of that has been confirmed by police or by any serious news outlet. Investigators have released no motive at all. The DNA and paternity angle lives entirely in social media speculation, so treat it as exactly that, a rumor the internet fell in love with, not a fact anybody has proven in court. Some of the online talk got even more specific than that, with posts claiming a woman had been dropping his location for months, giving somebody the drop, as they put it, feeding his movements to the people who eventually pulled up on him. Again, that is a claim, not a finding, and it is the kind of thing that spreads fast when a community is grieving and desperate for a reason. There's a second theory too, one that says this was gang-related, mistaken identity, that Billy got confused for somebody else entirely and died for a beef that was never his. The idea floating around was that he resembled an intended target tied to a completely separate dispute, and that the whole thing was a case of the wrong man in the wrong car. That one is just as unproven, and it points in a different direction from the jealousy theory, which is exactly the problem. When the official silence is total, every rumor gets to sound equally true, and none of them can be checked. What we know for sure is thin and terrible. A young father is dead. The mother of his child was nearly killed. 2 people are charged, and the reason is still locked inside a case file nobody outside the courthouse has fully seen. Here's why this pattern is not new and why it should sound familiar.
What happened to Billy Reio lines up almost eerily with what happened to another Southern rapper just a few years earlier, a man who went by Trouble. In June of 2022, the Atlanta artist, born Mariel Samante Orr, was shot once in the chest inside a woman's apartment in Coiners, Georgia. He was there with a female friend when it happened, the same way Billy was with a woman when he was hit. And the person who came for him did it over exactly the kind of relationship tangle we keep running into. Police say the woman's jealous ex-boyfriend, 33-year-old Jamichael Jones, forced his way into the apartment, found Trouble there, attacked the woman, and then shot the rapper during the struggle.
Michael Jones pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter Friday in the death of Atlanta rapper Trouble. Jones initially faced several charges, including malice and felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm and commission of a crime. Those other charges were dropped as part of the plea. Rockdale County Sheriff Eric Levitt spoke with reporters after Jones turned himself in shortly after the shooting in 2022.
Mother turned the son on to one of my sergeants, who began to talk to him and convince Mr. Jones to turn himself in. His mother was a huge resource in helping us apprehend him. Nobody wakes up in the morning wanting a bad outcome.
The shooting happened in June of 2022 at the Lake St. James apartment complex in Conyers. Investigators say Jones used to live there and broke up with his girlfriend right before the shooting. That morning, officials say Jones forced his way into her apartment, found Trouble in the woman's bed, and began hitting her. Investigators say when Trouble, whose real name was Mariel Orr, tried to stop the assault, he was shot. Jones later turned himself in.
We've accomplished what we need to accomplish, is to get someone off the street for committing a crime such as this.
A recent breakup, a new man in the picture, and a gun brought to settle a feeling. Jones turned himself in 2 days later, and in March of 2025, he pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 20 years. The method was different, an indoor shooting instead of a drive-by, and the shooter was a jealous man instead of a charged woman, but the engine underneath both stories is the same: a romantic entanglement, a wounded ego, and a rapper who happened to be near a woman somebody else felt possessive over. And Trouble is not the only one. Go back a little further and you find the South African rapper Flabba, born Nkululeko Habedi, who in March of 2015 was stabbed to death by his own girlfriend during an argument that boiled over into jealousy.
Escalated, and because things were said and na me, na yeah, you know, we were saying horrible things to each other, and yeah, it ended up just, he took the wrong turn, and I...
So did you stab him though?
Yeah, I stabbed him.
Damn. Where?
The chest.
Ooh. Like once or more than once?
Once.
Oh, you did once? So this was a mistake?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
She claimed self-defense, but she was convicted of premeditated murder after admitting under questioning that she meant to do it. Different country, different weapon, different relationship, and yet the same poison at the root of it. These are not one-off tragedies. They are the same story wearing different clothes, playing out in Atlanta, in Johannesburg, and now on a road in Durham.
Nobody has officially tied Billy's death to jealousy, and I am not going to pretend they have. But when you put his case next to Trouble's and next to Flabba's, you start to see the shape of a pattern that keeps swallowing young artists. One where the danger does not come from the stage or a rival crew, but from the messy, personal, human stuff. A baby, an ex, a broken promise, a heart that curdled into something violent. That is 2 stories now, both with a pregnancy or a paternity question sitting right at the center. Our third and final story is the one that hurts in a different way, because in this one, the man who was accused walked out of the courtroom a free man, and a whole family was left holding nothing. Let me take you to Racine, Wisconsin, in the fall of 2021, and introduce you to Vanessa Anderson. She was 31 years old, a mother of 2 girls, and by every account, she was the kind of person who filled up a room the second she walked in. Her family remembers her as a glamorous, free-spirited woman with a laugh that spread, someone who loved fashion, loved a good gathering, and above all, loved her children. She came from a big, tight family, one of the youngest girls among a whole crew of siblings, the kind of family where somebody is always the first to show up to the cookout with the energy already turned all the way up, and that somebody was usually Vanessa. She had grown up in Racine, gone to school there, and spent her adult years working different jobs while chasing a bigger dream, because she was full of ideas and wanted to build something of her own. Life had already handed her plenty of grief before any of this, with a father and 2 brothers she had buried in the years leading up to 2021, which is part of why the family leaned on each other as hard as they did. She had just moved into a new apartment, a fresh start she had been in for less than 2 weeks, and by her sister's account, there had even been talk of death threats in the time before she died, a loose and frightening thread that never got fully explained. And she was 9 months pregnant. She was carrying a 3rd daughter, a girl the family would later name Dior, and she was so close to the finish line that a cesarean was already scheduled for October 18th. This was supposed to be the happiest stretch of her life. New home, new baby, new beginning. Watch how the local news first reported what happened instead, because the contrast between what should have been and what was is almost too much.
Candles have been placed outside the woman's home, the family identifying the woman as 31-year-old Vanessa Anderson. She was 9 months pregnant and expected to have a C-section October 18th. 1 crime, 2 dead. 31-year-old Vanessa Anderson and her unborn baby girl killed Friday night inside her apartment near Martin Luther King Jr. Drive and High Streets in Racine.
She was one of a kind. She was her own individual. She was exactly the way she was supposed to be.
1 crime, 2 dead. On October 8, 2021, Vanessa's landlord entered her apartment after growing worried and found her body inside. She was just 8 days from the delivery date. The scene told a story of a violent, desperate struggle, and the earliest reports described her as having been stabbed. Listen to how her own sister described what was found in that apartment, and brace yourself, because it is hard.
She was, I think, stabbed multiple times.
31-year-old Vanessa Anderson's sister says the pregnant mother, about to give birth to her 3rd child, was found naked, horribly murdered in her rented Racine home. Her body discovered by her landlord Friday.
She was 9 months pregnant, scheduled for a cesarean on the 18th of this month.
The apartment was a wreck. Investigators walked into pools of dried blood, overturned furniture, and broken items scattered everywhere. The whole place telling the story of a fight that went on long enough for a 9 months pregnant woman to try, with everything she had, to survive it. There were signs someone had stayed afterward to clean: a mop bucket, blood-soaked washcloths, and a container of baby wipes soaked red in the sink, which is a chilling detail on its own, because it means whoever did this was calm enough to try to erase it. Among the items recovered were a pair of scissors and a broom handle, and forensics later pointed to that broom handle as the likely weapon. Later, the official autopsy would shift the cause of death away from what the early reports called stabbing, landing instead on blunt force trauma, while her full-term baby girl died from the loss of blood flow that came with her mother's injuries. The wounds that first looked like stab marks were actually punctures from that kind of beating, which is why the early news and the final findings did not match. 2 lives, a mother and a daughter who never got to take a breath, gone in the same act of violence, inside the home that was supposed to be her fresh start. The grief that came after was the kind that reshapes a whole family. Her 2 daughters, one 12 and one 13 at the time, were left without their mother right as they were waiting to meet their baby sister.
Last 5 years, Lanaya and Jabe Anderson have experienced pain 2 young girls never should.
I just feel so lost in life. I'm hurt.
They've been grieving the loss of their mother, never imagining that heartache could grow.
It was really hard for all of us.
In October 2021, as they awaited the arrival of their baby sister, their mother, Vanessa Anderson, was stabbed to death inside her Racine home just 8 days before her due date.
She was 9 months pregnant. That's not fair at all.
Her sisters were left trying to describe a pain that doesn't have words. Watch one of them try.
We would talk, we would share food recipes, we would just, we really lived in that moment.
Behind her tears Sunday afternoon, LaShonda Anderson says the pain is powerful now that her younger sister, 31-year-old Vanessa Anderson, is gone.
I can't describe it because it hurts so bad.
The neighborhood answered the way neighborhoods do, lining the sidewalk in front of her building with a row of candles for a woman who had lived there less than 2 weeks. And through the tears, the family kept circling back to the same unbearable truth, that she was as vulnerable as a person can be, 9 months long, and somebody still chose to do this.
And there was blood everywhere.
A row of candles lined the sidewalk in front of the home where the murder victim had lived less than 2 weeks. She says her sister was looking forward to a third daughter.
It was a lot of new beginnings for her that ended very shortly. She didn't deserve what happened to her. Nobody deserved that. She was in such a vulnerable state, being 9 months pregnant. And I just pray and hope whoever's responsible for it is caught.
The way she was found adds one more layer of cruelty to it. It was her landlord who let himself in around 5 in the evening after growing worried, and what he walked into is a thing no one should have to see. A young woman gone, her home turned into a crime scene, and blood everywhere. She had been in that apartment less than 2 weeks. The fresh start she had been so proud of became the place where she and her daughter both died. And she was not alone in a bigger, more painful sense. Across the country, homicide is one of the leading causes of death for pregnant women, and when it happens, the person responsible is very often a partner, an ex, or the man tied to the pregnancy. That is not a coincidence. It is a pattern, and Vanessa's case fitted almost perfectly, which is exactly why investigators zeroed in where they did. At first, the police had no suspect in custody, and the cause of death was still officially unknown, while the family begged the public for help and offered a reward of $20,000 for anything that led to an arrest. But investigators were already pulling on the one thread that would eventually give them a name, and that name belonged to a married man with a secret, which is exactly where the final part of this whole story goes. The man at the center of the investigation was William Bunch, and the thing that put him there was biology. Post-mortem DNA testing confirmed that Bunch was the father of Vanessa's unborn child, a fact that mattered enormously because Bunch was married to another woman. Prosecutors would later argue that this was the whole motive, that Bunch saw the pregnancy as a bomb sitting under his marriage, and that he decided the simplest way to protect the life he had was to make sure that baby was never born. The case investigators built was heavy, even if it was mostly circumstantial. A key witness told police that in the days before the killing, Bunch had asked to borrow a crowbar so he could break into Vanessa's home and, in his words, take care of the situation, saying she was threatening to ruin his life. The witness said no. That same witness said Bunch deliberately left his phone at home the night of the murder so it could not ping his location near her apartment, and, most damning of all, described details about the crime scene that had never been made public, the kind of details only someone connected to the act would know. The witness account went even further than a borrowed tool and a missing phone. The person told police that Bunch described how it happened, entering through a window, beating Vanessa, pulling her back inside when she tried to run for her life, and leaving her the way the landlord would later find her. That is the part that made the testimony so heavy, because it was not just motive and opportunity, it was a play-by-play of the killing that matched what only the police and the killer should have known. It also was not the first time Bunch had been on the wrong side of the law. He already carried a felony record from an old robbery conviction, and back in 2010, a traffic stop in Racine turned up a stolen handgun in his car, which landed him a felon in possession charge that he ultimately pleaded no contest to. So the man at the center of this was not a stranger to violence or to guns, even if the specific charge here would come down to circumstantial proof. When police questioned Bunch himself, his own body seemed to give him away. He flatly denied any involvement, telling them he didn't have anything to do with it, but they described him as evasive and nervous, sweating hard and breathing heavy the whole time, while he leaned on GPS data from his phone as an alibi that placed him somewhere else.
The problem with that alibi was the same witness who said the phone was left at home on purpose that night, which means the very device Bunch pointed to as his proof of innocence was allegedly sitting miles from where the real action was, by design. Put it all together, the paternity, the motive, the crowbar, the missing phone, the inside knowledge, and in June of 2022, 8 months after the murders, Bunch was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, one for Vanessa and one for her unborn daughter. He pleaded not guilty, and each count carried the possibility of life in prison. And then the case sat and sat and sat. The trial got pushed back again and again, with part of the delay coming from Bunch's defense attorney withdrawing over a conflict of interest because he had previously represented one of the key witnesses the prosecution planned to call. Years passed. The daughters grew from kids into teenagers, with their mother's case still unresolved. It was not until early February of 2026, more than 4 years after Vanessa and Dior were killed, that the trial finally began, and it lasted just 5 days. The family walked into that courtroom believing this was the moment they would finally get to breathe. Watch what happened instead.
In June 2022, her boyfriend, 46-year-old William Bunch, was arrested and charged. Family hoped they could begin to heal. Last week, his trial began. After 5 days, it ended in a way the Andersons did not anticipate.
I was lost for words. I'm still lost.
A jury found Bunch not guilty, acquitting him in the stabbing death of Vanessa and her unborn baby.
I feel there's no justice.
The Anderson family says they are confused and deeply saddened, not understanding how this happened.
No one want to feel this.
As they grieve, they're more determined than ever to continue to stand up for a woman they loved so much.
I'm going to fight for her justice. We're going to get justice.
Not guilty on both counts. The jury acquitted William Bunch, and he walked out a free man. The defense had hammered on the one weakness in the whole case, which was that for all the motive and all the suspicious behavior, there was no direct physical evidence, no fingerprints, no DNA at the scene, nothing that put Bunch's hands on Vanessa in that apartment. And in a courtroom, the burden is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, not a story that feels true. The jury decided the story was not enough, and just like that, the case went from nearly closed to officially unsolved, with no other suspect anywhere in sight. For Vanessa's daughters, the pain of that verdict landed on top of years they had already spent waiting. They were kids when their mother was killed, and they were teenagers by the time the trial finally came, having grown up carrying a loss that was never allowed to close. One of them called it simply not fair. Another said it was really hard for all of them, and you could hear in their voices how much they had been holding on to the hope that this trial would give it a name and an ending. Instead, they walked out with neither. Her sister put it as plainly as it can be put, saying she was lost for words and still lost, and that as far as she could see, there was no justice in any of it. For the family, the verdict was a second death. Everything they had held together for over 4 years came apart in a single afternoon. But even shattered, they refused to go quiet, and the way they answered is the part I want you to carry out of this.
Now, Anderson hopes whoever's responsible for her sister's death will be held accountable.
What if it was your sister? What if it was your auntie? What if it was your daughter? There's somebody murdered 9 months pregnant. And then you will want someone to speak up. So speak up and do what's right.
They are not done fighting.
Listen to their vow and to the plan they made the moment the criminal case failed them.
I'm gonna fight for her justice. We're gonna get justice.
We reached out to Bunch's lawyer. She did not want to comment. The Racine County District Attorney's Office didn't get back to us. The Andersons say they plan to pursue a civil lawsuit and are currently looking for an attorney.
A civil suit is a lower bar than a criminal one. In a criminal trial, the jury has to be sure beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest standard there is. But in a civil case, a family only has to show that it is more likely than not that the person is responsible. That gap is exactly why families who lose in criminal court so often turn to the civil side, because a door that slammed shut on one standard can still be open on another. So even with Bunch acquitted and walking free, the fight for Vanessa and Dior is not over. The Andersons said they were already looking for a lawyer, still standing on the same promise they made in the hallway outside that courtroom, that they would get justice one way or another. That is our third and final story, and now I need you to step back and see all three at once, because laid side by side, they are telling us the same thing.
Look at what connects them. Keyshawn Stewart was killed after his ex could not accept that he had a new partner and a baby on the way. Billy Reio died in a drive-by with the mother of his child beside him, while the internet still argues over a paternity rumor nobody has proven. Vanessa Anderson was killed 9 months pregnant by the married man whose child she was carrying, and then the courts let him walk. 3 cities, 3 completely different lives, and the same quiet trigger buried under all of it, which is that a baby, a pregnancy, or a paternity question became the reason a human being was killed. The thing that is supposed to be the start of a new life kept turning into the end of one. And notice how differently the systems treated each one. Keyshawn's alleged killer is still sitting in jail waiting on a trial that may take another year to arrive. Billy's case gave the family 2 arrests, but not a single word on why, so they are left grieving a son with a question mark hanging over his memory. Vanessa's family sat through more than 4 years of delays, only to watch the man they blamed walk out clean. 3 families, 3 completely different outcomes, and not one of them got the thing they actually needed, which was a full and honest ending. Justice, when it comes at all in these stories, tends to come late, partial, or not at all. If there is a lesson here, it is a hard and simple one. The most dangerous moments in these stories were not out in the streets with strangers. They were up close with people who once claimed love, tangled in jealousy, ego, and the fear of getting exposed. A car note, a pregnancy, a paternity test, a marriage somebody wanted to protect. These are small, ordinary human things, and yet each one became the seed of a killing. Pay attention to how someone handles losing you, and take the warning signs seriously, because the record shows that the person closest to the situation is very often the one who becomes the threat. A threat spoken out loud, a jealous streak that keeps getting worse, an ex who cannot let a new relationship exist in peace. None of that is drama to be laughed off. And in all 3 of these stories, it was the last warning anybody got. Rest in peace to Keyshawn Stewart, to Iris Jeffrey, and to Vanessa Anderson and her daughter, Dior. If you know someone caught in a situation that is starting to feel like one of these, a jealous ex who will not let go, a threat that everybody keeps brushing off, do not wait for it to blow over. Say something to them. Drop it in the comments so it reaches somebody who needs to read it tonight. Because the whole point of telling these stories is so the next one doesn't have to happen.